The Galactic Senate chamber fell silent as the emergency klaxons echoed through the massive crystalline dome. Ambassador Krixtal of the Vortak Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes with 4 of his 6 arms while his compound eyes scanned the panic spreading across the assembled delegates. The holographic display in the center of the chamber flickered with urgent red warnings. "All vessels, this is Fleet Command," crackled the voice over the communication array. "Unknown contact has breached the security perimeter of Nexus Prime. Repeat, unknown contact approaching the capital." Emperor Zethran, the supreme ruler of the galactic throne, rose from his towering seat that dominated the chamber. His scaled purple hide glistened under the artificial suns as his serpentine neck extended to its full 12-foot height. For 3 centuries, nothing had dared approach the capital world without permission. The combined fleets of 16 species protected this system with technology that could shatter planets. "Impossible," hissed Zethran, his forked tongue tasting the fear in the air. "Nothing can penetrate our defenses. Show me this phantom." The holographic display shifted, zooming in on a section of space near the outer sensor grid. Empty blackness filled the view. The sensor operators manipulated their controls frantically, cycling through different detection methods. Gravitational sensors showed nothing. Energy scanners revealed empty space. Even the quantum field detectors that could spot a grain of sand from 1,000,000 kilometers away registered 0 contacts. "Sir, we're detecting massive gravitational distortions," reported Commander Vexani from the sensor station. "Something huge is out there, but we cannot see it." Fleet Admiral Mordun, a Krillian warrior whose species had conquered 40 worlds, stepped forward. His battle-scarred carapace clinked as he moved. "Deploy the deep space scanners. If something is hiding, we will find it." The chamber watched in tense silence as the most advanced detection technology in the galaxy swept the area. The Nexus Prime defense grid consisted of 3,000 automated platforms, each armed with planet-killing weapons. Patrol fleets from every major species maintained constant vigilance. Yet something had slipped past all of it. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, announced the sensor operator. "Distance 12 million kilometers and closing." "Still nothing on visual," added another technician. "Whatever it is, it's completely invisible to our eyes." Emperor Zethran's tail lashed with growing anger. "Launch interceptor squadrons. I want whatever this is identified and destroyed if it poses any threat." Within minutes, 500 fighters launched from the orbital platforms surrounding Nexus Prime. The sleek craft spread out in attack formation, their energy weapons charging as they raced toward the unknown contact. Each fighter carried enough firepower to level a city, and their pilots were veterans of countless battles. "Fighter Wing Alpha approaching contact zone," reported Squadron Leader Telmoth. Still no visual confirmation. Sensors show, wait. Something is happening. The space around the fighters began to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot metal. A low rumbling sound somehow transmitted through the vacuum of space, felt more than heard by every living being in the system. The shimmer intensified, reality itself seeming to bend and twist. Then, it appeared. The ship that decloaked was unlike anything in the galactic databases. Where most vessels followed organic curves inspired by the creatures that built them, this craft was all hard angles and geometric precision. It stretched nearly 3 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull a matte black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange markings covered the surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "By the ancient void," whispered Admiral Mordun. "What species builds like that?" The unknown vessel dwarfed even the massive throne ships that served as the Emperor's personal fleet. Its design spoke of a civilization that viewed space not as an ocean to swim through, but as territory to conquer. Weapons ports dotted the hull like the eyes of some predatory beast, each one larger than most fighters. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," announced the communications officer. "Audio only. The language, our computers cannot identify it." "Put it through," ordered Zethran. Static filled the chamber, followed by a voice speaking in harsh, angular syllables that grated against sensitive hearing organs. The translation computers worked frantically to decode the alien language, but the patterns made no sense. No species in the galaxy spoke like this. After several minutes, the computers finally produced a rough translation. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force vessel Indomitable. We request immediate audience with your leadership regarding urgent matters affecting galactic security. Silence fell over the chamber. In the vast databases that catalogued every known species, there was no entry for Terran or human. The word itself felt strange on alien tongues, requiring sounds that most species could not properly produce. Unknown vessel, Admiral Mordun transmitted, you have violated Nexus Prime airspace without authorization. Identify your species and explain your presence immediately. The response came quickly, the alien voice now speaking through translation software that made the words comprehensible but, no less unsettling, we are human. We come from a world you call Sol 3, though we know it is Earth. We carry information about a threat that will destroy everything you have built here. Emperor Zethran's eyes narrowed to slits. Humans. I have never heard of such a species. How did you locate our capital? How did you penetrate our defenses? Your defenses are impressive, came the reply. But, they were designed to stop known technologies. We represent something new to your galaxy. The arrogance in the statement sent ripples of anger through the assembled delegates. Species that had ruled star systems for millennia bristled at the suggestion that these unknown creatures possessed superior technology. The Vorthak had conquered their way across 1,000 worlds. The Krillians had never lost a major battle. The idea that some unheard-of species could simply waltz past their defenses was impossible to accept. You speak boldly for trespassers, snarled Admiral Mordun. Perhaps you should be reminded of your position. He gestured to his aide, who began transmitting targeting coordinates to the defense platforms. 300 massive weapons began tracking toward the human vessel. Each weapon could punch through the armor of any known warship with a single shot. Admiral, I would not recommend that course of action, said Captain Chen, her voice carrying a note of calm warning that somehow made it more threatening than any shout. You are outnumbered 3,000 to 1, Mordun replied. Surrender now and you will be treated according to galactic law. Numbers are not everything, Chen responded. We learned that lesson long ago on our own world. But, you are welcome to try. The challenge hung in the air like a physical presence. In the entire recorded history of the Galactic Throne, no single ship had ever dared to face the combined fleets of Nexus Prime. The idea was beyond arrogance, it was insanity. Sir, whispered Commander Vexani, our sensors are detecting some kind of energy buildup from the human vessel. The readings don't match any known weapon signatures. Zethran studied the tactical display. The lone human ship sat motionless as hundreds of fighters swarmed around it like angry insects. Its weapons remained powered down, showing no signs of aggressive intent. Yet something about the situation felt wrong to the Emperor's experienced instincts. You claim to bring information about a threat, Zethran said finally. What threat could possibly concern us that we cannot handle ourselves? The same threat that destroyed our homeworld's first colonies, Chen replied. The same threat that turned thriving systems into graveyards filled with the bones of entire civilizations. We call them the Devourers, though that name hardly captures what they truly are. Nervous murmurs ran through the chamber. The name meant nothing to galactic databases, but, the way the humans spoke it carried weight that transcended translation. There was a quality of absolute certainty in her voice that suggested personal experience with whatever these Devourers were. Explain these Devourers, commanded Zethran. They consume everything, Chen said simply. Planets, stars, entire systems. They convert matter itself into more of themselves, spreading like an infection across the galaxy. We have been fighting them for over 50 years. Now they are moving in this direction. The Emperor's laugh was a sound like breaking glass. You expect us to believe that some unknown threat has escaped our attention? Our sensor networks monitor every system within 100 light-years. Nothing moves without our knowledge. Your sensor networks cannot detect them, Chen replied. They exist partially outside normal spacetime. By the time you can see them, they are already among you. Enough, roared Admiral Mordun. This is obviously a deception designed to weaken our resolve. Unknown vessel, you will surrender immediately or face the consequences. The human captain's response was immediate and shocking. Admiral, if you insist on testing our capabilities, please ensure your pilots are prepared to eject when their fighters are disabled. We prefer not to cause unnecessary casualties. The sheer audacity of the statement left the assembled delegates speechless. A single ship was offering to spare the lives of pilots who were about to attack it. The arrogance was so complete that it crossed the line into something almost admirable. "Launch all fighters," ordered Mordun, his voice thick with rage. "Show these humans the price of insulting the galactic throne." 2,000 additional fighters poured from launch bays across the system. The combined force represented more firepower than most species possessed in their entire fleets. They formed attack formations that had been perfected over centuries of warfare, each pilot a veteran of multiple campaigns. "Human vessel, this is your final warning," transmitted Squadron Leader Telmoth. "Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded." "Squadron Leader, my weapons are not powered," Captain Chen replied. "They don't need to be." Before anyone could ask what she meant, space around the human vessel began to change. The stars themselves seemed to bend and twist as reality warped around the ship. The first wave of fighters entered the distortion zone and simply stopped. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Stopped. "Control, this is Alpha Leader," crackled Telmotha's voice over the communications array. "We have lost all engine power. Weapons are down. Life support is functioning, but we cannot move. Repeat, we are completely immobilized." "Impossible," breathed Commander Vexani. "Our fighters use quantum engines. Nothing can simply shut them down." Wave after wave of fighters entered the zone around the human ship and suffered the same fate. Within minutes, over 1,000 of the galaxy's most advanced combat craft hung motionless in space, their pilots trapped but unharmed. The human vessel sat in the center of the disabled fleet like a predator surrounded by paralyzed prey. "How?" whispered Admiral Mordun. "Localized manipulation of quantum fields," Captain Chen explained as if she were discussing the weather. "We learned the technique from studying Devourer technology. Your engines require specific quantum states to function. We simply adjusted those states in our immediate vicinity." Emperor Zethran stared at the tactical display in growing horror. A single human ship had neutralized a quarter of his fighter fleet without firing a shot. No known technology in the galaxy could accomplish such a feat. The implications were staggering. "Release my pilots," he commanded. "Of course," Chen replied. "We told you we prefer to avoid casualties." The distortion field collapsed and the fighters immediately regained power. They pulled back to a safe distance, their pilots badly shaken but unharmed. The demonstration had lasted less than 10 minutes, but it had shattered fundamental assumptions about technological supremacy that had stood for millennia. "Now," said Captain Chen, "perhaps we could discuss the real threat facing your empire." Emperor Zethran slowly settled back into his throne, his mind racing to comprehend what he had witnessed. In a single moment, these unknown humans had proven they possessed technology beyond anything in the galactic databases. They could have destroyed his fighters but chose mercy instead. They spoke of threats that could devour entire star systems as if from personal experience. "You said the Devourers destroyed your colonies," Zethran said finally. "How many worlds did you lose?" 17 systems in the first wave," Chen replied. "Including our most advanced research stations and 3 billion colonists. We learned from that mistake." The casual mention of such massive casualties sent chills through the chamber. 3 billion dead was a number that dwarfed most wars in galactic history. Yet the humans spoke of it as a learning experience rather than a devastating defeat. "How did you survive what we could not?" asked Ambassador Crixtal, his multiple arms trembling with barely contained fear. "We adapted," Chen said simply. "Humans are remarkably good at surviving things that should kill us. We studied the enemy, learned from our mistakes, and built better weapons. Then, we hunted the Devourers across half the galaxy to make them pay for what they did to our people." The words carried a weight of absolute conviction that made several delegates step backward involuntarily. The idea of hunting something that could consume entire star systems seemed impossible, yet these humans spoke as if it were a simple fact. "And, now you come to warn us," Zethran observed. "We come to offer alliance," Chen corrected. "The devourers that escaped our pursuit are heading toward this region of space. Your empire represents the largest concentration of inhabitable worlds in their path. When they arrive, you will face the same choice we did: adapt or die." "What exactly are you proposing?" asked the Emperor. "Partnership," Chen replied. "You have numbers and resources. We have experience and weapons designed specifically to fight this enemy. Together, we might be able to stop them before they consume everything you have built." Admiral Mordun's laugh was harsh and bitter. "You expect us to trust beings who appeared from nowhere and disabled our defenses? How do we know you are not the real threat?" "Because if we were your enemy," Captain Shin said quietly, "this conversation would already be over." The truth of that statement hung heavy in the chamber. The human ship had demonstrated the ability to neutralize their most advanced weapons without apparent effort. If they had come to conquer rather than warn, the galactic throne would already be dead. "Show us," commanded Emperor Zethran. "Show us these devourers you speak of." "Very well," Chen replied. "But, I warn you, the images we are about to transmit are not easy to witness. They document the final hours of the Kepler research station before its destruction." The holographic display shifted, showing a peaceful star system with 3 inhabited worlds and numerous space installations. The recording began from the perspective of a research station orbiting the system's primary world. Everything appeared normal until space itself began to change. The darkness between stars developed a sick, oily quality that seemed to move with malevolent purpose. Reality twisted and, bent as shapes that hurt to look at directly began to emerge from the void. They were massive beyond comprehension, yet somehow wrong in a way that made seasoned warriors weep. "By the ancient gods," whispered Ambassador Crixtal. The creatures, if they could be called creatures, flowed through space like living liquid. They consumed everything they touched, converting matter into more of themselves with terrifying efficiency. Planets cracked and crumbled, their substance absorbed into the growing mass of wrongness that spread through the system like cancer. The worst part was the screaming. Somehow, the psychic death cries of entire worlds transmitted across space as billions of lives were snuffed out in moments. The research station's crew tried to flee, but escape was impossible. The devourers moved faster than light itself, consuming spacetime along with everything else. The recording ended with the camera slowly dissolving as the devourer mass reached the station. The final image showed tentacles of living darkness wrapping around the facility before the transmission cut to static. Absolute silence filled the Senate chamber. Several delegates had fainted during the recording. Others stood frozen in horror at what they had witnessed. The casual destruction of an entire star system in less than an hour was beyond their worst nightmares. "How many systems have they consumed?" asked Emperor Zethran, his voice barely above a whisper. "In our region of space?" "Over 200, Captain Chen replied. Each victory makes them stronger and faster. The force approaching your territory represents the combined mass of everything they have consumed over the past 50 years. "And you fought these things?" "We learned to fight them," Chen corrected. "Traditional weapons are useless against entities that exist partially outside normal space. You need weapons that can affect reality itself." "What weapons?" demanded Admiral Mordun. "Reality anchors that prevent them from phasing between dimensions. Quantum disruptors that can affect their non-physical components. And, most importantly, courage. The devourers feed on fear and despair as much as matter. Species that panic and flee are consumed more easily than those that stand and fight." Emperor Zethran studied the human vessel on his display. It looked so small compared to his massive fleet, yet these humans had somehow survived against an enemy that devoured star systems. They had not only survived but fought back successfully enough to drive the creatures away. "How long before they arrive?" he asked. "Our calculations suggest 18 months at their current rate of approach," Chen replied. "Less if they find inhabited systems to consume along the way." 18 months to prepare for the end of everything we have built," Zethran mused. "What do you need from us?" access to your manufacturing facilities, your best scientists and engineers, and, most importantly, your trust. We cannot fight the Devourers alone, and you cannot survive them without our help." The Emperor looked around the chamber at his advisors and allies. Fear was written on every face, but he also saw determination beginning to replace the initial shock. His empire had survived for millennia by adapting to new challenges. This would simply be the greatest test they had ever faced. "Captain Shen," he said finally, "you and your crew will be granted diplomatic immunity and full access to our facilities. But I want to meet with you in person. If we are to trust each other with the survival of our civilizations, we should know who we are dealing with." "Agreed," Shen replied. "But I should warn you, humans may not be what you expect. We are a young species by galactic standards, and our methods can be unconventional." "After what I have seen today," Zethran said, "I suspect unconventional may be exactly what we need." As the massive human warship began moving toward the orbital docking platforms, Emperor Zethran couldn't shake the feeling that his empire had just crossed a threshold from which there would be no return. Everything that had come before, the centuries of expansion, the careful balance of power between species, the comfortable assumption of technological supremacy, all of it was about to change forever. The humans had arrived, and with them came both salvation and revolution. The docking bay aboard the orbital platform had been hastily cleared and reconfigured to accommodate the massive human vessel. Emperor Zethran stood with his full court in the reception area, watching through reinforced transparisteel as the Indomitable slowly maneuvered into position. Up close, the ship was even more unsettling than it had appeared on the tactical displays. "Look at those weapon ports," whispered Admiral Mordun to his aide. "I count over 300 visible hardpoints. What kind of species builds a ship that is more weapon than vessel?" The human ship settled into the docking clamps with surprising gentleness for something so massive. Steam vented from hidden ports along its hull as internal atmospheres equalized. Strange lights flickered beneath the matte black surface in patterns that seemed almost organic, despite the geometric design. "Sir," announced Commander Vexani, monitoring the docking procedures, "the human vessel is requesting atmospheric specifications for the meeting. They wish to ensure compatibility." "Tell them we will adjust our environment to accommodate them," Zethran replied. He wanted these humans to be as comfortable as possible during negotiations. If they truly possessed weapons capable of fighting the Devourers, cooperation was essential. A section of the human ship's hull simply dissolved, revealing an airlock that hadn't been visible moments before. The technology required for such seamless integration was beyond anything in the galactic databases. More proof that these beings represented something genuinely new and, potentially dangerous. The first figure to emerge from the airlock sent ripples of surprise through the assembled dignitaries. Captain Sarachen was smaller than most galactic species, standing barely 6 feet tall in her form-fitting black uniform. Her skin was a warm brown color that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously, and her dark hair was pulled back in a practical style that emphasized the sharp intelligence in her brown eyes. But it was her movements that truly caught attention. Every step was precise and controlled, like a predator conserving energy for a strike. She carried herself with absolute confidence despite being surrounded by beings twice her size. The weapon at her side was unfamiliar in design but obviously lethal in purpose. Behind her came 6 additional humans, each different in appearance but sharing that same controlled grace. Their uniforms bore markings that meant nothing to galactic databases, but the way they moved made it clear these were elite soldiers. They spread out in a protective formation around their captain without appearing threatening. "Your Imperial Majesty," Captain Shen said, her voice carrying clearly across the docking bay despite the translator's mechanical tones. "I am honored to meet you in person." She performed what was obviously a formal salute from her species, bringing her right hand to her chest in a gesture that somehow conveyed both respect and readiness for violence. Her escort followed suit, their movements perfectly synchronized. Emperor Zethran studied the human captain with growing fascination. She was so small compared to his 12-foot frame, yet she showed no intimidation whatsoever. Her eyes met his directly, something few beings dared to attempt. There was a quality of absolute determination in her gaze that reminded him of the greatest warriors he had known. "Captain Chen," he replied, performing a formal bow that lowered his serpentine neck to her level. "Welcome to Nexus Prime. Your arrival has already changed everything we thought we knew about the galaxy." "Change is inevitable," Chen replied. "The question is whether we control the change or let it destroy us." The group moved toward the conference chambers, with Chen walking beside the Emperor despite the obvious size difference. Protocol demanded that she walk behind as a visiting dignitary, but something about her presence made such formalities seem irrelevant. She spoke as an equal to the ruler of 16 worlds, and somehow made it seem natural. "Your ship is remarkable," observed Admiral Mordun as they walked. "I have never seen technology that could disable our fighters so efficiently." "The Indomitable is a third-generation Devourer hunter," Chen explained. Everything about her design was dictated by the need to fight an enemy that operates outside normal physical laws. Traditional weapons and armor are worse than useless against such opponents. "How many ships like this do you have?" asked Ambassador Crixtal. 17 operational vessels in the main fleet," Chen replied. "Another 30 under construction. Each ship represents the combined resources of multiple solar systems and the accumulated knowledge of 50 years of warfare." The numbers were staggering. If humans could build and maintain 47 warships of this capability, their industrial base must dwarf anything the Galactic Throne possessed. Yet they spoke of fighting a running battle against an enemy that had forced them from their home systems. The conference chamber was the largest room on the orbital platform, designed to accommodate delegations from all major species. The curved walls displayed real-time views of space, showing the human ship docked alongside the sleek organic curves of galactic vessels. The contrast was stark and somehow ominous. Emperor Zethran took his position at the head of the massive table, with his advisors arranged according to strict protocol. Captain Chen chose a seat that gave her a clear view of all entrances while keeping her back to a solid wall. Her escort positioned themselves at strategic points around the room, their casual competence making the Emperor's guards look clumsy by comparison. "Let us begin with the basics," Zethran said once everyone was seated. "Tell us about your species, Captain. Where do you come from, and how did you develop such advanced technology?" Chen leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "Humans evolved on a world we call Earth, in a system about 200 light-years from here. We developed spaceflight approximately 300 years ago and established our first colonies within 50 years. For 2 centuries, we expanded peacefully across 43 star systems." "Peaceful expansion," mused Ambassador Crixtal. "Most species achieve spaceflight through military necessity. How did you develop such advanced weapons without warfare?" "We had plenty of warfare," Chen said with a dry smile. "Just not with other species. Humans have been fighting each other for millennia. We learned to build better weapons out of necessity, not choice." The casual admission of internal warfare surprised the delegates. Most species achieved unity before developing interstellar travel. The idea of a spacefaring civilization that still fought among itself was disturbing. "You fight your own kind?" asked Admiral Mordun. "We used to," Shen corrected. "The first Devourer attack ended most internal conflicts rather quickly. Nothing unites humans like a common enemy that threatens our survival." "Tell us about that first attack," commanded Zethran. Chen's expression hardened. "The Kepler system. 3 worlds, 14 billion people, our most advanced research facilities. We had no warning. The Devourers simply appeared from nowhere and began consuming everything in their path." She activated a small device that projected holographic displays above the table. The images showed human colonies in their final moments, cities dissolving as reality-warping entities float across planetary surfaces. The screams of the dying somehow transmitted through the recording equipment. "Our response was immediate and completely inadequate," Chen continued. "We sent the Third Fleet to investigate 400 ships carrying the most advanced weapons humanity had ever built. The Devourers consumed them in less than an hour." The hologram showed massive human warships firing weapons that tore holes in space itself, only to watch helplessly as their targets absorbed the energy and grew stronger. Ships that could shatter continents were reduced to component atoms in seconds. 400 ships, breathed Admiral Mordun. Your losses in a single battle exceeded most wars. That was just the beginning, Chen said grimly. The Devourers followed our survivors back to the core worlds. We lost 17 systems in the first 6 months, including Earth itself. Shocked silence filled the chamber. The idea of losing one's homeworld was unthinkable to most species. Yet this human spoke of it as if it were simply another tactical setback. Earth is gone, whispered Ambassador Crixtal. Consumed completely, Chen confirmed. 10 billion humans died in the final battle. We evacuated as many as possible, but most chose to stay and fight to the end. It was educational. The way she said the last word sent chills through the assembled delegates. What kind of species described the destruction of their homeworld as educational? What did you learn? Asked Emperor Zethran. That conventional warfare is useless against an enemy that exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously, Chen replied. That fear and panic make you easier prey. That sometimes the only way to win is to become something your enemy doesn't expect. She manipulated the holographic controls, showing images of human survivors fleeing through space. But these were not panicked refugees. The ships moved in precise formations, their crews working with cold efficiency even as their civilization burned behind them. We spent the next 5 years studying captured devourer tissue and analyzing their attack patterns, Chen continued. We learned that they exist partially in subspace, which makes them immune to most energy weapons. They feed on both matter and psychic energy, growing stronger from the fear and despair of their victims. How do you fight something like that? Asked Commander Vexani. You adapt, Chen said simply. We developed new weapons based on quantum manipulation technology. Reality anchors that force the devourers into normal space where they can be damaged. Psychic dampeners that cut off their emotional feeding. And, most importantly, new tactics that turn their strengths against them. The hologram shifted again, showing human ships engaging devourer entities in combat. But these battles looked nothing like the earlier massacre. The human vessels moved like dancers, their weapons striking with surgical precision at targets that seemed impossible to hit. We stopped running and started hunting, Chen explained. Every devourer we destroyed taught us more about their biology and behavior. Every system we liberated gave us more resources and recruits. It took 20 years, but we eventually drove them out of human space entirely. You drove them away, Emperor Zethran said slowly. You actually defeated creatures that could consume star systems. We convinced them that humans were more trouble than we were worth, Chen corrected. Devourers are efficient predators. When prey becomes too dangerous to hunt safely, they seek easier targets elsewhere. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. The creatures that had forced humans from their homeworld were now heading toward the Galactic throne because humans had made themselves too difficult to consume. In essence, humanity had passed the problem along to their unsuspecting neighbors. You led them to us, accused Admiral Mordun. No, Chen said firmly. They were already heading in this direction. The galactic spiral arm rotates in patterns that bring species into contact over time. We simply accelerated a meeting that was inevitable. She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed stellar maps covering thousands of light years. Red indicators marked devourer incursions stretching back over millennia, forming a clear pattern of expansion along the galaxy's spiral structure. The devourers have been consuming civilizations for longer than any of our species have existed, Chen explained. They move in cycles, stripping entire regions of space before moving on to new feeding grounds. You were next on their list whether we intervened or not. Then, why warn us? Asked Ambassador Crixtal. If their arrival is inevitable, why not let them consume us and move on? Chen's expression softened slightly. Because extinction should never be inevitable. Every species deserves the chance to survive and grow. We came here to offer you that chance. At what price? Demanded Admiral Mordun suspiciously. Partnership, Chen replied. We need your manufacturing capabilities and resources. You need our weapons and experience. Together, we might be able to stop the Devourers permanently instead of just driving them away to threaten others. Emperor Zethran studied the human captain's face carefully. There was absolute sincerity in her expression, but also something harder. She spoke of partnership, but the power dynamic was clear. Humanity possessed the weapons and knowledge necessary for survival. The Galactic throne needed what they offered far more than they needed galactic resources. "What exactly are you proposing?" he asked. "Full technological exchange," Chen said. "We share our anti-devourer weapons and defensive systems with your species. In return, you provide manufacturing support and allow us to establish joint training programs for your military forces." "You want to train our soldiers?" Admiral Mordun's voice carried clear suspicion. "I want to teach them how to survive," Chen corrected. "Fighting Devourers requires specific skills and mental conditioning that most species lack. Your warriors are brave and skilled, but they have never faced an enemy that feeds on fear itself." She activated another hologram showing human soldiers in training. The exercises were unlike anything in galactic military doctrine. Soldiers practiced fighting while reality warped around them, their movements adapted to combat in environments where physics itself was unreliable. "Devourer combat requires absolute mental discipline," Chen explained. "Fear makes you visible to them. Despair makes you vulnerable. Doubt can get your entire unit killed. We train our people to function normally while reality collapses around them." "And if we refuse your offer?" asked Emperor Zethran. Chen's expression remained neutral, but her answer chilled the room. "Then, in 18 months, this chamber will be empty space and the Devourers will be hunting for their next target." The casual certainty in her voice was more terrifying than any threat. She wasn't trying to intimidate them, she was simply stating facts based on 50 years of experience. "You have seen what they can do," Chen continued. "We have shown you recordings of their attacks. Every species that has faced them alone has been consumed entirely. The only survivors are those who learn to fight back using methods the Devourers don't expect." "What makes human methods so special?" asked Ambassador Crixtal. Chen smiled, and, for the first time, the expression was genuinely warm. "We're stubborn. Most species, when faced with impossible odds, either surrender or flee. Humans get angry and look for ways to make the impossible possible. It's not always a good trait, but it has its uses." "Your ship disabled our fighters without firing a shot," observed Admiral Mordun. "How is that possible?" "Quantum field manipulation," Chen explained. "We learned the technique by studying how Devourers phase between dimensions. By creating localized distortions in the quantum foam, we can disrupt the energy patterns that allow your engines to function." "But that's impossible," protested Commander Vexani. "Quantum fields require massive energy expenditures to manipulate." "Only if you try to manipulate them directly," Chen said. "We found that you can achieve the same effects using resonance patterns that amplify natural quantum fluctuations. The energy requirements drop by several orders of magnitude." The technical explanation sailed over the heads of most delegates, but the scientists in the group looked stunned. What Chen described casually represented advances in physics that should have taken centuries to develop. "How did you develop such technology so quickly?" asked Ambassador Crixtal. "Desperation," Chen replied bluntly. "When your species faces extinction, you discover capabilities you never knew you had. Humans have always been tool users and problem solvers. The Devourers simply gave us problems worth solving." Emperor Zethran leaned forward in his throne. "Show us more of these weapons. If we are to trust our survival to human technology, we need to understand what we are accepting." Chen nodded to one of her escort, who activated a portable holographic projector. The display showed technical schematics for devices that seemed to violate fundamental physical laws. Weapons that fired bullets of compressed spacetime. Shields that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Engines that moved ships by convincing the universe they were already somewhere else. "These designs are beyond our understanding," admitted Admiral Mordun after studying the schematics. "They were beyond ours too, initially," Chen said. "Understanding came with necessity. We will provide full technical documentation and training programs for your engineers and scientists. What guarantees do we have? Asked Ambassador Crixtal. How do we know you won't use these weapons against us once the Devourer threat is eliminated? Chen's expression turns serious. You have the same guarantee any species has when dealing with humans, our word. We don't break promises to our allies, and we don't start wars we don't intend to finish. The casual reference to starting wars was not reassuring, but Emperor Zethran sensed truth in her words. These humans could have attacked the moment they arrived. Instead, they had offered alliance and demonstrated restraint even when provoked. I need to consult with my advisors, Zethran said finally. This decision affects the survival of 16 species across thousands of worlds. Of course, Chen replied. But I should mention that time is a factor. The Devourers will not wait for us to reach comfortable political arrangements. Every day we delay is another day they move closer to inhabited systems. How long can you give us? 72 hours, Chen said. After that, we will need to begin preparations whether you join us or not. The few humans who survived the core world's exodus will not abandon the fight just because others choose not to participate. The subtle threat was clear. Humanity would continue hunting Devourers with or without galactic support. The question was whether the galactic throne would be protected allies or collateral damage in the coming war. Captain Chen, Emperor Zethran said as the meeting concluded, you and your crew are welcome to remain docked while we deliberate. Is there anything you require for your comfort? Just access to your technical databases, Chen replied. We need to understand your manufacturing capabilities and defensive systems. If we're going to work together, integration planning should begin immediately. Granted, Zethran decided. Knowledge sharing would demonstrate good faith and provide his scientists with opportunities to study human technology firsthand. As the delegations filed out of the conference chamber, Admiral Mordun approached the Emperor privately. Sir, I don't trust them. They're too confident, too powerful. What happens after the Devourer threat is eliminated? Emperor Zethran watched Captain Chen through the transparisteel windows as she discussed something technical with her escort. The humans moved with casual competence that spoke of absolute confidence in their abilities. Admiral, he said quietly, I think the real question is what happens if we refuse their help. Because I believe Captain Chen was absolutely sincere about one thing, in 18 months, everything we have built will be gone unless we learn to fight like humans. The truth of that statement settled over them like a shroud as they watched the small human delegation return to their massive warship. The galaxy was about to change forever, and they could either adapt or be consumed by forces beyond their comprehension. The age of galactic supremacy was ending. The age of human warfare was about to begin. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been running for 36 hours without break. Representatives from all 16 major species argued in the Great Chamber while Emperor Zethran listened from his elevated throne. The debate had grown increasingly heated as the implications of humanity's proposal became clear. You ask us to surrender our technological independence to unknown aliens, shouted Ambassador Vrexth of the Hegemony Worlds, his crystalline carapace flashing angry red patterns. How do we know this is not an elaborate conquest scheme? Because if they wanted to conquer us, they already would have, replied Ambassador Crixtal wearily. Their single ship disabled a quarter of our fleet without firing a shot. If conquest was their goal, why offer alliance? In the observation gallery above the main floor, Captain Chen and her security detail watched the proceedings through translation interfaces. The human captain remained calm despite the heated rhetoric below, but her escort showed signs of growing impatience with the political process. Sir, whispered Commander Torres, Chen's tactical officer, we could end this debate in minutes. A demonstration of our defensive capabilities would convince them quickly enough. No, Chen replied quietly. Fear-based decisions create unstable alliances. They need to choose cooperation because they believe in it, not because we terrify them into submission. Below, the debate continued as Ambassador Shekshran of the Mining Consortium raised another objection. Even if we accept their claims about these devourers, why should we trust human military doctrine? They admit to centuries of internal warfare. Are these the advisors we want for our defense forces? Admiral Mordun stood to respond, his battle-scarred carapace gleaming under the chamber's artificial suns. I have reviewed the tactical recordings Captain Chen provided. Human military methods are unconventional, but they are undeniably effective against impossible odds. He activated the chamber's main display, showing footage from the liberation of the Tau Ceti system. Human ships move through space like living creatures, their formations flowing and adapting to enemy movements with organic grace. When Devourers appeared, reality warping around their massive forms, the human vessels responded with tactics that seemed to anticipate the impossible. Look at these maneuvers, Mordun continued. They fight in three-dimensional space while accounting for temporal distortions and quantum uncertainty. Their weapons target enemy positions that don't exist yet but will exist when the projectiles arrive. Impossible, declared General Fakvar of the warrior clans. No organic mind can calculate such complexities in real time. Human minds can, Admiral Mordun replied. I have studied their training recordings. They teach their pilots to think in 11 dimensions simultaneously while maintaining combat effectiveness. It should not be possible, yet they do it routinely. Ambassador Crixtal gestured for attention with 4 of his 6 arms. I have been analyzing the technical specifications they provided. Their quantum manipulation technology alone would advance our civilization by centuries. The medical applications could eliminate most known diseases. At what cost? Demanded Ambassador Vrexth. Technology that advanced comes with dependencies. What happens when we can no longer function without human systems? Emperor Zethran had been listening to the same arguments for over a day. Fear of human intentions warred with recognition that their offer might represent the only path to survival. The recordings of Devourer attacks were undeniably real, and the approaching threat would not wait for political consensus. Bring Captain Chen to the floor, he commanded. The chamber fell silent as the human delegation was escorted to the speaking platform. Captain Chen moved with that same controlled grace that had impressed observers since her arrival. She showed no intimidation despite facing the concentrated attention of the galaxy's most powerful leaders. Captain Chen, Emperor Zethran began, my advisors have raised concerns about human intentions. You offer powerful weapons and advanced technology in exchange for industrial support. Such generosity is unusual in galactic politics. Chen smiled slightly at the diplomatic phrasing. Your Majesty, human generosity is quite limited when our own survival is not at stake. In this case, your survival and ours are completely linked. If the Devourers consume your empire, they will eventually return to hunt the remaining human colonies. So you help us to help yourselves, observed Ambassador Vrexth. Exactly, Chen replied without hesitation. Self-interest is honest. It creates reliable partnerships because both sides understand the motivations involved. The blunt admission actually seemed to reassure several delegates. Political promises of friendship and mutual benefit were common and usually false. Simple acknowledgement of shared self-interest was refreshingly honest. Tell us about human intentions after the Devourer threat is eliminated, commanded General Fakvar. Will your species seek to establish dominance over our territory? General, humans have no interest in ruling alien species, Chen replied. We can barely govern ourselves effectively. Establishing colonies and trade relationships? Certainly. Creating some kind of galactic empire? That would be a nightmare we have no desire to manage. But, you would maintain military superiority, pressed Admiral Mordun. We would maintain defensive capabilities, Chen corrected. The Devourers are not the only threat in the galaxy, just the most immediate one. Our ships and weapons are designed for fighting entities that conventional forces cannot touch. Against normal opponents, galactic military technology is perfectly adequate. You speak as if there are other threats we should know about, observed Ambassador Crixtal. Chen exchanged glances with her escort before answering. Our deep space monitoring systems detect signs of activity from the galactic core region. Energy signatures that match no known technology. We believe there are other forces in the galaxy that make the Devourers look simple by comparison. Shocked murmurs ran through the chamber. The idea that something could be worse than creatures that consumed star systems was almost impossible to contemplate. What kind of forces? Demanded Emperor Zethran. We don't know, Chen admitted. Our longest-range sensors can barely detect them, and the distances involved make direct investigation impossible with current technology. But the energy outputs suggest artificial constructions on truly massive scales. How massive? Asked Commander Vexani. Structures that could dismantle entire solar systems for building materials, Chen replied grimly. Whatever they are, they represent technology so advanced that our anti-devourer weapons might be completely useless against them. The revelation added another layer of complexity to an already difficult decision. If humanity's warnings were accurate, the galaxy faced not one existential threat but, potentially several. Captain Chen, said Ambassador Shexran slowly, if these core entities are so powerful, why help us at all? Why not flee to another galaxy and avoid the conflict entirely? Because running away doesn't solve problems, Chen replied. It just delays them. Humans learned that lesson when we tried to retreat from the devourers. Eventually, you run out of places to hide. So you choose to fight impossible odds rather than seek safety elsewhere, observed General Fakvar. General, humans have been fighting impossible odds since we first stood upright on our homeworld, Chen said with quiet pride. We evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill us through ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and predators that should have eliminated us millions of years ago. Impossible odds are just Tuesday for our species. The casual confidence in her voice was simultaneously inspiring and terrifying. These humans spoke of galaxy-spanning threats as if they were merely technical problems to be solved through application of sufficient firepower and determination. Demonstrate, commanded Emperor Zethran suddenly. If we are to trust our survival to human methods, show us what those methods can accomplish. Chen nodded to her tactical officer, who activated a portable holographic projector. The display showed real-time sensor feeds from the outer system, where 3 automated defense platforms maintained patrol routes. Commander Torres will now disable those platforms using our ship's quantum field manipulation system, Chen announced. The platforms are shielded against all known weapon types and maintain active countermeasures against electronic warfare. The assembled delegates watched as targeting data appeared on the display, showing the indomitable weapons systems locking onto targets 12 million kilometers away. The defense platforms registered the targeting and began evasive maneuvers while charging their weapons. Quantum field manipulation engaged, reported Commander Torres. Initiating cascade resonance in 3, 2, 1, now. On the display, space around the defense platforms began to shimmer. The massive weapons systems simply stopped functioning, their energy outputs dropping to 0 in seconds. The platforms themselves remained intact and undamaged, but they were completely powerless. How? Breathed Admiral Mordun. We create localized distortions in the quantum foam underlying spacetime, Chen explained. These distortions interfere with the energy patterns that allow matter to maintain coherent structure. Weapons lose power, engines stop functioning, even life support systems shut down temporarily. Temporarily? Asked Commander Vexani with obvious concern. The effect lasts approximately 30 minutes before quantum coherence reasserts itself, Chen replied. Long enough to disable enemy forces without causing permanent damage. We prefer non-lethal solutions when possible. Emperor Zethran studied the tactical display as the defense platforms drifted powerlessly through space. The demonstration was even more impressive than the earlier disabling of the fighter squadrons. These platforms were specifically designed to resist every known form of attack, yet human technology had neutralized them effortlessly. Restore their power, he commanded. Chen nodded to Torres, who manipulated her controls. Within seconds, the defense platforms came back online, their systems functioning normally as if nothing had happened. Your weapons are remarkable, Zethran acknowledged. But, I must ask, what prevents you from using these capabilities against us once the alliance is established? Mutual dependence, Chen replied honestly. Human technology requires rare materials that exist primarily in your territory. Our manufacturing capacity was severely damaged during the evacuation from the core worlds. We need your industrial base as much as you need our weapons. What materials? Asked Ambassador Shekshran, the mining consortium's representative leaning forward with obvious interest. Quantum-coherent crystals that form only in certain stellar environments, Chen explained. Metamaterials that require zero-gravity manufacturing facilities. Exotic matter produced by controlled gravitational collapse. Our weapons are useless without these components. And these materials exist in our territory? In abundance, Chen confirmed. Your empire controls 17 systems where quantum-coherent crystals form naturally. Your zero-gravity manufacturing capacity exceeds human capabilities by several orders of magnitude. Partnership benefits both species significantly. The economic arguments were as compelling as the military ones. Trade relationships based on mutual dependence created stability that military threats could not achieve. Admiral Mordun, Emperor Zethran said, "What is your professional assessment of human military doctrine?" The old warrior was quiet for several moments before responding. Your Majesty, I have studied warfare for over 2 centuries. I have never encountered tactical methods as innovative as those demonstrated by human forces. Their approach to combat incorporates variables that most species cannot even perceive. Explain. They fight in multiple dimensions simultaneously, Mordun said slowly. Their weapons target enemy positions in past, present, and future time streams. Their defensive systems exist partially outside normal space, making them nearly impossible to damage with conventional weapons. Is such complexity necessary? Asked General Farquhar. Against the Devourers, yes, Chen interjected. Entities that exist in multiple dimensions cannot be fought using single-dimension tactics. You must be able to engage them across all aspects of their existence simultaneously. She activated another holographic display showing Devourer combat footage. The creatures flowed through space like living nightmares, phasing in and out of visible reality as they consumed everything in their path. Human ships engaged them with weapons that fired through time itself, targeting the creatures before they could fully manifest in normal space. Our tactics evolved through necessity, Chen continued. Every engagement taught us more about Devourer capabilities and weaknesses. After 50 years of warfare, we have developed methods that are specifically designed to counter their advantages. And you would teach these methods to our forces? Asked Admiral Mordun. Complete tactical integration, Chen confirmed. Your officers would train alongside human crews until they can function as a unified force. The learning curve is steep, but your species have the intelligence and adaptability required. Ambassador Krixtal raised a technical question. The quantum manipulation technology you demonstrated, can our existing ships be retrofitted with such systems? Some can, Chen replied. Others will require complete reconstruction. We have prepared preliminary engineering assessments for your major ship classes. Most can be upgraded, but the process is extensive. How extensive? Demanded Admiral Mordun. Complete overhaul of power systems, weapons arrays, and defensive grids, Chen said bluntly. Your ships will be more capable afterward, but they will also be fundamentally different vessels. You're asking us to rebuild our entire fleet, observed General Farquhar. I'm asking you to upgrade your fleet to fight enemies that your current technology cannot touch, Chen corrected. The alternative is watching those ships be consumed by creatures that can dissolve matter with a thought. Emperor Zethran looked around the chamber at his advisors and allies. Fear was still present in many faces, but it was being replaced by grim determination. The evidence was overwhelming. Humanity offered the only viable path to survival against an enemy that had already demonstrated its ability to consume entire civilizations. Captain Chen, he said formally, the Galactic Throne accepts your proposal for alliance. We will provide full access to our manufacturing capabilities and resources in exchange for anti-devourer technology and tactical training. Excellent, Chen replied with obvious satisfaction. We should begin immediately. The Devourers won't wait for us to complete preparations. What do you need first? Asked Admiral Mordun. Access to your primary shipyards and technical databases, Chen said. My engineers need to assess your manufacturing capabilities and identify priority upgrade targets. We also need to establish training facilities for your military personnel. Granted, Emperor Zethran decided. Admiral Mordun will coordinate with your forces to ensure full cooperation. Thank you, Your Majesty, Chen said. I should mention that additional human fleets are en route to this system. 17 ships cannot protect an empire of your size. We'll need at least 50 vessels to establish adequate defensive coverage. 50 ships like yours, asked Ambassador Vrexth with obvious concern about so many powerful vessels in galactic space. 50 ships optimized for different roles, Chen clarified. Heavy assault vessels for direct devourer engagement, fast attack craft for patrol duties, and mobile shipyards for on-site repairs and construction. A balanced fleet capable of responding to multiple threat vectors simultaneously. The scale of human commitment was impressive and slightly overwhelming. 50 advanced warships represented more firepower than most species possessed in their entire military forces. When will these additional ships arrive? Asked Admiral Mordun. The advance elements should reach this system within 10 days, Chen replied. The main force will arrive over the following month as they complete patrols in human territory. Patrols? Questioned Commander Vexani. Making sure the devourers we drove out stay gone, Chen explained. Just because we won the war doesn't mean we can relax our vigilance. Devourers are patient hunters. They probe for weaknesses constantly. The reminder that humanity was still actively fighting these creatures added urgency to the alliance. This was not a theoretical threat discussed in comfortable safety, but an ongoing war that would soon expand to include galactic territory. Captain Chen, Emperor Zethran said as the session concluded, "You and your people have our full support. What do you need to begin operations immediately?" Quarters for incoming human personnel, workshop space for our engineers, and access to your tactical planning facilities, Chen replied. Also, I'd like to begin joint training exercises as soon as possible. Your pilots and mine need to learn to work together before the real fighting begins. Everything you require will be provided, Zethran promised. Admiral Mordun, coordinate with Captain Chen's staff to establish integrated command structures. As the chamber emptied, Emperor Zethran remained on his throne, watching the human delegation through the transparasteel windows. In less than 48 hours, these small beings had convinced the galaxy's most powerful empire to fundamentally restructure its military forces and industrial base. The transformation would be painful and expensive, but the alternative was extinction. Humanity had offered survival in exchange for cooperation, and, despite lingering fears about their intentions, it was an offer the galactic throne could not refuse. The age of galactic independence was ending. The age of human galactic alliance was about to begin, forged in the fires of a war that would determine whether civilization itself could survive in a galaxy full of hungry predators. Outside the chamber windows, the human warship Indomitable hung in space like a promise of salvation and a threat of revolution. Everything that came after would be different, and Emperor Zethran could only hope that different would be enough to keep them all alive. The transformation of Nexus Prime began immediately. Within days of the alliance agreement, human transport ships arrived carrying thousands of engineers, technicians, and military advisors. The orbital shipyards that had operated according to the same principles for centuries were suddenly buzzing with alien activity as humans implemented radical changes to production methods. Admiral Mordun stood on the observation deck of Shipyard 7, watching human and galactic engineers work side by side on the first retrofit project. The massive Throne-class battleship Sovereign hung in the construction framework like a patient undergoing surgery. Half of its hull had been stripped away to expose internal systems that were being completely rebuilt. "The changes are more extensive than I anticipated," he commented to Captain Chen, who had joined him to observe the work. "Devourer hunting requires fundamental modifications to ship architecture," Chen replied, studying the technical displays showing progress throughout the vessel. "Your original design was built for fighting other starships. Our upgrades adapted for fighting entities that exist partially outside normal spacetime. The crew will require extensive retraining," Mordun observed. "Complete retraining," Chen corrected. "Your officers will need to learn to think in 11 dimensions while maintaining tactical awareness across multiple time streams. It's not an easy transition." Through the transparasteel windows, they could see human instructors working with galactic military personnel in the training simulators. The exercises looked nothing like traditional naval combat. Crews practiced responding to situations where physics itself became unreliable, or enemy attacks could arrive before weapons were fired. "How are my people adapting?" Mordun asked. "Better than expected," Chen admitted. "Galactic military discipline is excellent, and your species have the cognitive flexibility required for multi-dimensional tactics. Some are struggling with the psychological aspects, but that's normal." "Psychological aspects?" Chen pointed to one of the training simulators where a mixed human galactic crew was practicing emergency procedures. "Fighting devourers requires absolute mental discipline. Fear, doubt, or panic make you visible to them across dimensions. We train crews to maintain emotional control while reality collapses around them." The simulation they were watching showed a recreation of a devourer attack on a space station. Reality warped and twisted as the creatures manifested, their presence causing equipment failures and structural collapse. The crew continued working calmly despite the chaos, following procedures that seemed impossible to execute under such conditions. "Impressive," Mordun murmured as he watched a Krillian engineer troubleshoot failing systems while spacetime literally bent around him. "I would not have believed such composure was possible." "Your people are natural warriors," Chen replied. "They adapt quickly once they understand what they're facing. The real challenge is preparing them for the psychological impact of their first real devourer encounter." A communication alert interrupted their conversation. "Captain Chen, Admiral Mordun, please report to the tactical center immediately," came the voice of Commander Torres. "We have urgent developments." They made their way quickly through the shipyard's corridors to the central command facility that had been established to coordinate the massive retrofit program. The tactical center was a maze of holographic displays showing ship construction progress, training schedules, and defensive preparations across the entire system. "Report," Chen ordered as they entered. "Long-range sensors have detected anomalous readings at the edge of the system," Commander Torres announced. "Energy signatures consistent with Devourer scout entities." The tactical display shifted to show the outer sensor perimeter, where faint distortions in spacetime indicated the presence of something that shouldn't exist. The readings were subtle, barely detectable even with advanced human sensors, but unmistakably hostile. "How many?" Chen asked, her voice remaining calm despite the implications. "Difficult to determine," Torres replied. "Scout entities exist primarily in subspace. We're detecting quantum echoes from at least 3 separate sources, possibly more." Admiral Mordun studied the display with growing alarm. "Scouts usually precede main attacks by how long?" "Varies," Chen said grimly. "Sometimes days, sometimes months. But their presence means the main force has located inhabited systems in this region. They're conducting detailed reconnaissance now." "What do they learn from scouting?" asked Mordun. "Everything," Chen replied bluntly. "Population distributions, defensive capabilities, industrial infrastructure, psychological profiles of defending forces. By the time the main attack begins, devourers know exactly how to maximize feeding efficiency." Emergency klaxons began sounding throughout the facility as the alert spread to all human and galactic forces. The retrofit program immediately shifted into crisis mode, with work crews prioritizing combat systems over secondary upgrades. "How many ships do we have operational?" Chen demanded. 17 human vessels fully combat-ready, Torres reported. 12 galactic ships with partial upgrades completed. Another 30 still undergoing major modifications. "Not enough," Chen muttered. "We need to accelerate the program." "Captain," Admiral Mordun interjected, "perhaps we should engage these scouts before they can report back to the main force." Chen shook her head. "Scout entities are nearly impossible to destroy, and attacking them alerts the main force that we're aware of their presence. Better to let them think they're undetected while we prepare." "Then, what do you recommend?" "We continue preparations but assume we have weeks rather than months," Chen said. "Priority goes to upgrading your heaviest ships and training your best crews. When the attack comes, we'll need every advantage we can get." Over the following days, the pace of activity throughout the Nexus Prime system intensified dramatically. Human engineers worked around the clock alongside Galactic technicians to complete ship upgrades. Training programs were compressed from months into weeks as crews learned to operate technology that challenged their understanding of reality itself. Captain Chen spent most of her time in the tactical center, coordinating preparations across dozens of worlds and hundreds of facilities. Sleep became a luxury as reports flowed in from across human space about devourer movements. "Ma'am," reported Lieutenant Harrison from the communications station, "we're receiving updates from the outer colonies. Devourer activity is increasing along a front spanning 12 light-years. They're definitely massing for a major offensive." "Estimated time to arrival?" Chen asked. "Based on current movement patterns, 6 to 8 weeks, Harrison replied. "But, if they find heavily populated systems to feed on along the way, they could accelerate significantly." Chen studied the strategic displays showing devourer movements across a vast region of space. The creatures moved in patterns that defied conventional military logic, flowing through dimensions that allowed them to bypass normal travel time. Predicting their exact arrival was impossible, but the signs all pointed to an imminent major assault. "Admiral Mordun," she called across the tactical center, "how many of your crews have completed basic anti-devourer training?" "Approximately 60%, Mordun replied, consulting his status boards. "Full tactical integration will require another month at minimum." "We may not have another month," Chen said grimly. "Begin emergency certification protocols for partially trained crews. They'll have to learn the rest during actual combat." "Is that wise?" asked Commander Vexani, who had been observing the preparations with obvious concern. "Wisdom has nothing to do with it," Chen replied. "When the devourers arrive, every ship we can field increases our chances of survival. Partially trained crews are better than no crews at all." The observation deck of the tactical center offered a view of the entire Nexus Prime system, where the signs of frantic preparation were visible everywhere. Transport ships moved in constant streams between worlds, carrying personnel and supplies. Construction frameworks surrounded dozens of vessels undergoing rapid upgrades. Fighter squadrons practiced maneuvers that incorporated human tactical doctrines. "Your species has transformed our entire military structure in a matter of weeks," Admiral Mordun observed as he joined Chen at the viewing windows. "Such rapid change is unprecedented in galactic history. Survival requires adaptation," Chen replied. "Species that cannot change quickly enough become extinct. It's a simple biological principle that applies to civilizations as well as individuals." "And yet you seem confident of victory despite the odds," Mordun noted. Chen's smile was grim but determined. "Admiral, confidence and optimism are different things. I'm confident that we'll fight effectively because we've done this before. Whether that will be enough to win, we'll find out soon enough." An urgent communication interrupted their conversation. "Captain Chen, we have priority signals from the deep space monitoring stations," announced Lieutenant Harrison. "Multiple contacts approaching from the outer system boundary." They rushed back to the tactical center as the displays updated with new sensor data. The readings were unlike anything in galactic databases, massive objects moving faster than light through dimensions that normal sensors couldn't detect. Only human technology could track their approach, and even that required extensive analysis to interpret the data. "Contact classification?" Chen demanded. "Devourer advance elements," Torres replied after studying the sensor feeds. "Minimum 12 separate entities, possibly more. They're using approach vectors that will bring them into the system within 72 hours. "So much for 6 weeks, Chen muttered. "All ships, immediate combat readiness. Begin evacuation of non-essential personnel from outer orbital facilities." "Captain," Admiral Mordun said urgently, "most of our ships are still undergoing modifications. We cannot possibly complete the upgrades in time." "Then, they fight with whatever systems are operational," Chen said firmly. "Commander Torres, signal the human fleet. All vessels to combat stations immediately." The tactical center erupted into controlled chaos as officers coordinated defensive preparations across the entire system. Emergency protocols activated throughout the galactic fleet as ships with partial upgrades prepared for combat against an enemy they barely understood. "Ma'am," reported Lieutenant Harrison, were receiving updated intelligence from the monitoring stations. The Devourer force is larger than initially estimated. Current count shows at least 30 separate entities approaching. 30, Chen repeated quietly, studying the strategic display. That's a full hunting pack. They're not just scouting anymore, this is the main assault. Can we stop them? Asked Admiral Mordun. We're about to find out, Chen replied. Signal all commands, defend every inhabited world, evacuate what you cannot protect, and prepare for the fight of our lives. Outside the tactical center windows, the lights of Nexus Prime glittered like stars against the darkness of space. Soon, the darkness would be filled with creatures that existed beyond normal reality, entities that could devour worlds and convert their substance into more hunger. But humanity had fought these monsters before and survived. Now they would discover whether their galactic allies possessed the strength and determination necessary to stand against the tide of extinction that was racing toward them through the void. The real war was about to begin, and everything they had built together would be tested in the fires of cosmic horror that few beings could comprehend and fewer still could survive. All stations report ready for combat, announced Commander Torres. Human and galactic forces standing by for final orders. Captain Chen looked out at the fleet that had been forged from two civilizations in a matter of weeks. Ships bearing human technology operated by crews who had learned to fight in 11 dimensions. It was impossible by any reasonable standard, yet it was their only hope. Signal all ships, she ordered. Engage when ready. Let's show the Devourers what happens when prey decides to bite back. The greatest battle in galactic history was about to begin, and the fate of countless worlds hung in the balance. Space around Nexus Prime began to change 12 hours before the first Devourer entity fully manifested. Reality itself seemed to sicken, with stars flickering in patterns that hurt to observe directly. The quantum foam that underlay normal spacetime developed tears and distortions that grew larger with each passing minute. Captain Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching sensor displays that showed readings no sane universe should produce. Around her, the combined human galactic fleet held formation in a defensive shell around the most critical worlds. 49 ships faced an enemy that had consumed star systems. Contact bearing 37 Mark 12, announced Ensign Patel from the sensor station. Devourer entity beginning manifestation sequence. The main display showed empty space beginning to writhe and twist as something massive forced its way into normal reality. The process was obscene to watch, like witnessing the universe itself being violated by forces that should not exist. All ships, combat formation Delta, Chen ordered. Quantum anchors to maximum dispersion. Do not engage until the entity is fully manifested. Across the fleet, newly upgraded galactic vessels moved into position alongside human warships. The crews had trained for weeks to fight an enemy beyond conventional understanding, and now they would discover whether the training was sufficient. Admiral Mordun's voice came over the communications array from his flagship, the newly retrofitted Sovereign. Captain Chen, my crews report ready for combat. Quantum anchor systems are operational. Acknowledged, Admiral, Chen replied. Remember, maintain emotional discipline. Fear makes you visible to them. The first Devourer entity completed its manifestation in a burst of wrongness that caused several crew members to lose consciousness. The creature was massive beyond easy comprehension, a writhing mass of darkness that existed in too many dimensions simultaneously. Tentacles of living void reached out toward the nearest inhabited world, and space itself began to dissolve at their touch. Entity has achieved full manifestation, reported Commander Torres from the tactical station. Quantum signature matches classification Apex 7. Estimated mass equivalent to a small moon. Weapons range in 30 seconds, added Lieutenant Reyes from the gunnery station. All quantum disruptors charged and ready.